have it live here in a second. And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most interesting topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 201st edition of Assembly Call Radio and our 675th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of February 11th, 2021. I'm your host, Andy Bottoms. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call, how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
Indiana is the national champion. When it comes down, Indiana will be champion. Smart takes the shot. The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
Well, the banner moment for me, I wasn't able to be on the post-game show from the Northwestern game, and the banner moment was surviving the first half, quite honestly, from a viewing perspective. A half that I intend to never, ever, ever at any point watch again. But the silver lining, if you will, was the guard play down the stretch that really propelled IU to a comeback and a win in an ugly game, but one they couldn't really afford to lose. And so as you look through the last few minutes of both regulation and into the overtime, it's a pretty compelling story of how IU's guards really put the team on their back and brought a victory home. Again, not necessarily a pretty win by any means, but in the win column and on the NCAA tournament resume, you don't really see that. But with IU down 54-47 and 2 minutes and 16 seconds left in regulation, this sequence unfolded. Al Durham makes 1 and 2 from the line. Al gets a steal. Al makes 2 more free throws. Armand gets a steal. Al makes 2 more free throws. You finally get a Northwestern miss as they get a shot off, and then Al hits a floater to tie it at 54. So that's 7 straight for Al to end regulation and tie the game up and send it to overtime. And in the second overtime, it was Armand Franklin time. IU got down 62-57. He hits a big 3 coming out of a timeout and a design play for him to get a shot. They then fell back behind by 6 points. It was 66-60 with a little bit over a minute left. And then this unfolded. Armand makes 2 free throws. Northwestern misses the front end of a 1-and-1. Armand makes 2 more free throws. Northwestern really has a shot clock violation, misses a 3 as the shot clock expires. And then Armand kicks it over to Al, who makes a jumper to tie it at 66. And so you look at those couple sequences and we think about how important guard play has been for this team. You had Al score the last 7 in regulation. Armand scored the first 10 in overtime with the Al Durham jumper from the top of the key, the only other basket in overtime for IU. And you had some Jerome Hunter heroics in the second OT, but in all, 25 of the last 32 IU points were from the starting guards. That was led by 13 during that stretch from Al, 10 from Armand, and a couple free throws from Rob Finney account for the other 2. And this team is going to turn this season into much of anything. We've harped on the guard play time and time again, and last night against Northwestern, big time kudos for those guys for really stepping up, particularly Al and Armand, who really brought it home and snatched a victory from the jaws of defeat on multiple occasions there. So for me, that was the banner moment, and we'll get into the Northwestern game a little bit more later in the show. But for now, let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. Coach and Jared are both off tonight, but here with me to my left.
Analyzing players, finding every wrinkle. He hasn't ever hosted, never lifted a finger. He's got all the.
Let me quickly add just one thing about this.
Dude just interrupted his own jingle.
He is Ryan Phillips. Ryan, have you recovered from watching the IU Northwestern game? 24 hours later, or do you feel like you're in a better place, both mentally and emotionally?
I don't think I'll ever recover from having to watch that game. Let's be real. A piece of me died watching that. Look, Indiana came away with a win, and we talked about this last night. And I know a lot of people thought that was a very negative show. And, we got the feedback about it that why are you guys being so negative? They won. And we weren't being negative. We were telling the truth. I mean, Indiana never should have been that close with Northwestern. That is a very, very bad basketball team. I know Northwestern beat Indiana earlier in the season. That doesn't mean that Northwestern's good. Indiana's performance in that game was terrible. And last night, their performance, I think I kept saying for 5/6 of the game, was terrible. Indiana did not deserve to win that game. They were rescued by Al Durham and Armaan Franklin. And while you look at what Armaan Franklin and Al Durham did, as we said last night in the postgame show, that was great. And those guys coming up big saved Indiana. And quite frankly, given what that game was, Indiana needed to win that game. You cannot lose that game and then be like, all right, let's just win the others. You needed to take care of business there. And so Armaan Franklin and Al Durham deserve praise for what they did down the stretch. Then you got to look at the rest of the team and be like, what were you guys doing? Like they didn't score a basket for the first 5 minutes and 35 seconds of the game. They couldn't score consistently on one of the worst defenses in the Big Ten, maybe arguably the worst defense in the Big Ten. And they really struggled throughout. And so, yeah, you win, but the win doesn't solve all the problems you have and that you showed. And the other thing is that the team is chronically not prepared to play and not prepared to start games off well. And so I when we were mentioning the negatives of that game, I think it's fair to, because of who Northwestern is. Northwestern is a bad basketball team, and Indiana played at the same level or below Northwestern for most of that game. That needs to get fixed. That should be a game where you win by 13, 15, something like that. And so that's why we were so negative. Now, does that mean we're not happy that they won? Of course not. We're happy they pulled it together and won. And if anything, it proves what we've all been saying on the show, that when the guards actually play well, Indiana's not a bad team. The problem is there's no consistency from the guards. And so when Al and Armaan play really well, this team's ceiling is so much higher than it had been for weeks, the last couple of weeks. So I think that you're happy to get the win against Northwestern, of course, but there are a litany of problems that need to get solved for this team. And when the guards step up and play well, as they have a few times this year, you see this team is much better, and they can overcome so many of those deficiencies when the guards just play well. And so you're hoping you see more consistency out of the guards, but honestly, at this point, who knows what we're going to get from game to game.
And to my right, we have the other godfather of IU sports podcasting. We had his partner on last week, and Scott has built a reputation throughout the world for being able to channel the voice of the common IU sports fan, also the only IU sports podcaster whose rants can rival Ryan's. He is Scott Caulfield. Scott, thoughts on IU basketball this week?
Yeah, what Ryan said. I second that. I feel bad for Andy.
Well, that was easy. Let's move on.
Yeah, let's talk football. I feel bad for Andy. He's got to deal with both Ryan and I. So get ready.
Yeah, this is like a trap. This is the equivalent of a trap game in podcasting right now. I know it's going to happen.
Yeah, I know. You got to get the mute button ready. Last night I watched the Super Bowl with my son, who's 8 years old, a couple nights ago, and I let him stay up a little bit past the second half to watch the Super Bowl. And so last night we're kind of in that same mode where I'm like, hey man, do you want to stay up late to continue watching this garbage of a game? And it's funny, like sometime middle of the second half, he's asking about buzzer beaters. Like, what's a buzzer beater? Have you seen one? And I'm like, oh yeah. Like, we tell him, I show him the video of the watch shot. His favorite player is Al Durham because he has a number 1 jersey and Al Durham wears number 1. So, he's 8. So that's enough to make him his favorite player. But we're watching the game, and then Al Durham hits basically, the buzzer beater to tie the game. Although it's like, dude, get your foot behind the line. That's all that I'm thinking. But he hits it, and I'm like, James, like, dude, that's your favorite player, buzzer beater. And it's like in pure kid fashion, like maybe it's like a high reserve of the game. He's like, oh yeah, okay. It's like, dude, like that's like, but you're asking about buzzer beater, like that's your player. Like, dude, this doesn't happen like that. He's just like, okay, is it cool? I'm like, all right, man, I'm done with you. But like that's my feeling with this game. It's kind of like that was my reaction to it. I mean, I agree with everything Ryan was saying. I will say this to me, I think it's okay to be negative about a win. To me, it's all about expectations. I think back to the football season. I interviewed some guys from 11 Warriors for our podcast. Sorry for the little, my own little plug there, but those guys are from Ohio State. And I'm not saying I ever want to become like an Ohio State fan, but I will say that in talking to them, they were
strongly recommend you don't.
Agreed. It's not a good idea. It's not a good look for anybody. The Bucky necklace is really heavy on your neck. But they were saying that, they're not arrogant. This is such an Ohio State thing. They're not arrogant, but they expect to go in and they expect to win every game by 2 touchdowns. And that's what they expect. Not just Big Ten games, like every game. Like they're playing Clemson, like they're playing the Browns. Like they expect to win by 2 touchdowns. And there's a part of me, it's like, I remember a time when IU basketball fans were kind of like that. Not touchdowns, I understand it's a different sport. But like we would go into the Big Ten. It's like, all right, well, we expect to beat the living piss out of, at the time, Wisconsin and Northwestern. And, those are easy, it would have been Nebraska had they been in the league at that time. But it's like, those are easy wins. And like, we'll get up for Purdue and like, we got to, I guess, play for Illinois. And like, that's the way it was. And to see where we fall, and this would be like 5 or 10 years from now, Ohio State being like, hey, man, like we played pretty good against Rutgers. Like we only turned it over 7 times, but you got to be happy with a win. It's like, to me, it's expectations. And I still view myself as an exceptionalist. And I still look at IU basketball as I want to play for that. I want to root and have a team that's at that like insane elite level. And so for me, that's where I put it, expectations. The guys played great. I don't know if any of this is replicatable because it hasn't been all season, but they played well. They did well. They beat Northwestern. It's like I said in previous pods with you guys, like that's the bare minimum of what I expect you guys to do. So congratulations. But, hey, Al Durham got a game-winning shot for my son, which he kind of half cared about. So there you go. That was a fun night at the Scott household.
Nice. All right. Well, here's what we're going to cover this week. IU got a commitment on Super Bowl Sunday from CJ Gunn. So Ryan will do a full scouting report at some point in the offseason, but we'll do the Cliff Notes version tonight. We'll also look back a little bit more at the Northwestern game, some of the themes that you guys hit on already, and then we'll look ahead at what remains on the IU schedule, at least what's out there right now, and then we'll answer your questions as we always do. All of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. But before we get to all that, we need to talk about our sponsor for tonight, which is Superior Insulation. And so the first thing you need to know about the Superior Insulators is that with them, as with almost all of our sponsors, is that they're diehard Hoosiers. Brad, the owner of Superior Insulation, is an IU fan and longtime Assembly Call listener. And the second thing you need to know about Superior Insulation is that they will literally make your life more comfortable by helping you fix drafty rooms, cold floors, and even excess noise. Plus, their systems help you save money through lower utility bills. More comfort and cost savings. That's like Al Durham and Armand Franklin taking turns hitting big shots in a must-win road game. And with winter here, bringing its frigid temperatures, now is the perfect time to invite Brad and his team out to your home or business so they can do for you what they've already done for IU. Yes, the Superior Insulators did all the air barrier systems and spray foam for the new IU Excellence Academy. Brad and his team also worked on the new football locker room, Marching 100 Hall, and many other buildings around campus. Like I said, they're Hoosiers through and through and damn good at what they do. Longtime listener named Rick reached out back in December and told me he booked a consultation with Superior Insulation, and you should too, because check this out. They have a special offer for Assembly Call listeners. You'll get a $50 home field apparel gift card when you call and schedule an appointment in a qualifying area. And since the Superior Insulators have 4 locations covering roughly the southern 2/3 of Indiana and the northern part of Kentucky, just tell me Assembly Call sent you to get your gift card. So visit insulators.com or just Google Superior Insulation to learn more and schedule your appointment. Then Brad and his team can help you create a healthier, quieter, and more energy-efficient home. That's insulators.com, INSEALATORS.com to learn more. And tell them the Assembly Call sent you to get your $50 home field apparel gift card. All right. So the big commitment at halftime of the Super Bowl was CJ Gunn committing to IU. And we usually get pretty in-depth with these with Ryan at various points when guys are ready to come in, but we've got a Thursday night show. We're just going to hit a couple of the high points with CJ and kind of what people can expect right now, and then we'll give Ryan time to review the tape, if you will, and let us know more about what to expect. But Ryan, as you look at CJ Gunn, what are the 1 or 2 things that you think he does that are going to translate really well, and or things that really help fill a void of something that this IU team is missing?
Well, one thing that's going to be music to Indiana fans' ears is that he's a shooter. He can shoot. And he's athletic, too. He's not just a guy who's a spot-up shooter. He's a really athletic guy. I think those are the 2 things that stand out. He's athletic and he can shoot. At 6'5", 175, he's got a lot of weight to put on and a lot of muscle to put on. He's a real skinny kid. but you look at the way he shoots the basketball, and he loves a pull-up jumper too, which is kind of interesting. You don't see that as much these days. It's usually a straight line drive or a three, but he can shoot threes. He gets really good. He has a really good release on his shot, really good rotation. And he gets up. He's a guy who has athleticism, and that helps him on the defensive end too. He's laterally quick, kind of has some length and athleticism that will really help him on that end. I mean, he needs, obviously, as any high school player, is going to need work in that arena, but he also, can get up and down the floor. So the shooting is the big thing though. The kid, he's already shooting 38% in high school, around there, from three. And he's also shooting in the 80s from the free throw line. So he definitely sets as a 2 guard, and he's going to play off the wing. He can drive as well and all that, but he's the main thing that stands out about him is his ability to shoot the basketball.
Well, I think it's fair to say that any time a guy comes in where shooting is one of the main skills, at this point, I think anyone will be happy to hear that, for sure. So what are, as you look at him, one or two things that he really needs to work on based on what you've seen so far, and something that either heading into college or something that he'll need to develop at IU to become a consistent contributor?
I think it's ball handling. I think that's the main thing that I see that stands out. He just needs to become a cleaner ball handler. And it's in the videos you watch, you see the ball come out of his hands a couple times, and just because he's not securing it on his hip, he's getting a little crazy with it. I would say the second thing that would concern me is just the ability to put on weight. Can he add muscle and be able to take sort of the physical aspect of being a guard in the Big Ten when you have to drive? Because otherwise, here's the thing: is that it's great to have a shooter. It's great to have a shooter, but when you have a guy who can do both driving and shooting, it makes him that much harder to defend for obvious reasons. Romeo Langford was a lot easier to defend because of his wrist, and he couldn't shoot threes. And CJ Gunn, I'm not putting him on that level as a prospect, but if you can do both, and take the physicality of driving in and getting bumped and being able to finish. And I think he has a really soft touch around the rim. I think he's a really good finisher, but he needs to be able to take the beating he's going to take every time he drives into the paint. So those are the two things that concern me with CJ. But again, he's a junior in high school right now. He's going to get better. And the other thing I really like about him is you look at the transition from freshman, sophomore, junior now, and the projection forward. He's getting a lot better. I would not be surprised if this guy cracks the top 75 in the recruiting rankings. He's over 100 right now, not far above it. He's sitting right at about 100. I could see him moving up significantly if he continues to develop.
Yeah, I mean, he's got good size as you think about some of the guards that come in. I think he's 6'5". Am I right about that?
He's about 6'5". He's listed at 175. I don't know what his weight is. You never know what they throw up for those, but he's about 6'5" and skinny. But the thing about being 6'5" is he's not Jordan Hulls. He's not gonna have trouble getting his shot off against length. I mean, he's 6'5", and he's athletic. He can jump. He'll be able to get his shot off. So I think that's big for a perimeter player. And also when you drive, again, the difference between being 6'1" and being 6'5" is tremendous as far as being able to finish at the rim.
Yep, agreed. There's a really good Q&A with both CJ Gunn and his dad that Alex posted on Inside the Hall. So that's another place guys can go. I think some of his even self-assessments match up pretty well with what Ryan talked about. Scott, I think you had a question you wanted to hop in with.
Yeah, I mean, I love hearing that we're going to get shooters. Like, that's a novel concept. My question to Ryan would be, having watched some of this, is, going back in time, like Demezy Anderson came in as a shooter. And I did not watch these guys. I'm not a big recruiting guy in high school.
Sure.
Like, he came in as a shooter. Christian Lander was a 5-star. Anthony Leal came in as a shooter. Like, that would be my question, is, do you see anything with Gunn that you think would make him more successful to translate that from high school to college, whereas we've seen the inability on some other guys to do that?
Yeah. So when Demezy was recruited, and Andy will remember this, I was highly critical of his shot. And I said, like, he's got touch and his shot goes in, but it's not a good shot, and it's very flat footed and all this stuff. When I see CJ Gunn, he has great form. His shoulders are always square. He's facing the basket. His feet are a little off. That's the one thing that will get sort of fixed, is his feet angle a little to the side instead of at the hoop. So he's not fully square to the hoop, but his shoulders are square. He gets up, he gets into a good shooting position, and his release and the rotation that comes off the ball look great. I mean, Demezi did it and the ball spun sideways, but for some reason, I don't know what it was about the physics of his shot. I clearly don't understand physics, because if I look at it, I don't know how Demezi Anderson ever made a shot in high school. With Lander, I also talked about his shot is that in the actual above the waist, Lander's great. His form, I mean, it's a little low, but it's form, the backspin he gets off the ball and all that, but his feet point completely away from the basket. And that's, any shooting coach will tell you, that's not how you make a shot. Now, some guys are talented to overcome those deficiencies of footwork and stuff, but he's not at this point. And so I think, again, this offseason is going to be huge for Lander. Leal is a good shooter. He's just not taking advantage of the opportunities necessarily. And again, he's a freshman in the Big Ten. He's not used to playing against guys who close out that quickly, who have that kind of size. It's going to take time for that to develop, but his shot form is excellent and it will be fine. I think that as he gets older, especially, and gets used to being relied upon as a shooter, you're going to see him take more. And you'll see Archie Miller and the other guys on the team often say to Leal, hey, shoot that. You were open, shoot that, So I think Leal is a more fair comparison to Gunn, just because of the form is right. The way they shoot, they've clearly been coached and trained as shooters and not been just sort of allowed to keep going because they make it. They have coachable, coached shooting form. So I would say, though, that's more of a correct comparison. I understand your hesitancy, though. We've heard for years, oh no, the shooters are coming. The shooters are coming. CJ Gunn can shoot the ball.
Now, the thing that I do like, it just real quick, that I love about him is we can add him to our great lineup of cool name guys. Like for a while there, when like you mentioned Jordan Halls, like Halls and Watford, like there was a time where I love this kind of weird stuff. You could run a lineup. They never did it, but you could almost run a lineup with like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of numbers, just the top 5 or the 5, the numbers and the jerseys. Right now, we have a possible cool lineup of, Race Thompson, great name. You get CJ Gunn, like you give him, the nickname Tommy Gunn, or your gun shooter, gunslinger. You got that. Jordan Geronimo is like a top-notch, ace level name. Like we're putting together just a killer name squad.
It's gonna look, the written roster is gonna look awesome. It's just gonna look awesome.
Christian spelled all funky. I love it.
Yeah.
Nice. Now, look, I was just curious what Leal is actually shooting from three. He's 8 of 2 overall, 36% from three, 7 of 17, so over 41% in Big Ten play.
Yeah, he's just got to take more shots.
To be made of trying to get him to shoot more. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's taken all of 2 2-point shots so far as well. 50% on twos.
And one of them was one that fell into his lap under the basket.
That was the one.
Yeah.
That was the one. Yeah. I don't even remember what the other one was, but I did remember the same shot. Ryan, do I dare ask you for a player comp with CJ?
You
Gunn,
shouldn't.
Do we withhold that question?
No,
until later.
An Indiana related one would be sort of a much more well-rounded and better Al Durham. If you look at their body types and sort of the way they attack the game, and Al's become a pretty good shooter. I think if you look at the same time frame, CJ is way ahead of where Al was as a basketball player. He's a very well-rounded basketball player, but there's so much upside there because of the athleticism. This isn't Anthony Leal when he reached, sort of the peak of where he was offensively in high school. All he could do was get better defensively and with effort. That was it. Because he could shoot it already and he could do this and do that, but he was never going to be a guy who's going to take guys off the dribble at the college level. CJ Gunn has a long way to go development wise in a positive direction. He's already a pretty good player. So there's definitely a lot of upside here for him to continue to get better. I think that's what's most exciting about him is that he can already shoot. A lot of these guys we've had coming in are like, well, they're drivers and they score points, but you look at the shot. Armand Franklin was that way. Armand Franklin could do everything on a basketball court except shoot when he was in high school. Rob Finney was kind of that way too. He was more of a driver, and his 3-point shot got gradually better in high school. CJ Gunn can already do all of that stuff and is already a pretty dominant player in high school.
All right. Well, coming up on the assembly call, we're going to look back a little bit more at the Northwestern game and then look ahead to the final 6 scheduled games on the IU schedule and talk about what they need to do in those games to get to the NCAA tournament. So we're going to hit that next. Stick with us here on the assembly call. All righty. Welcome, everybody. I'll write the time down here. All right. Yeah, these this was like 2 weeks in a row for Assembly Call Radio. I think we had
we hadn't had one
Thursday games there where we hadn't had one. Or at least I hadn't been on it. But I think there was a lot of
we had for like a month, I think, or something like that.
Yeah. So Anyway, who knows? But yeah, Ryan, the weather here in the Midwest is still really, really solid. So you're really missing out on
I'm missing out, man.
snow. And
I will say
cold.
last year when we came to the meetup, it snowed like picture like our last day, I think it was a Sunday, we were flying out. It snowed like Christmas picture snow, like the big flakes and everything. And my girlfriend was just like, oh, it's so beautiful. I don't really mind the snow. I'm like, don't get that going. But it was like the one
nice to
afternoon.
look at, but
yeah, it was like the one afternoon where we got perfect. It wasn't ice chips like you get in Bloomington a lot. It was actually big, beautiful, fluffy snow. And we got delayed. And so we stayed in Indianapolis and we were staying on a really high floor of a hotel. And like you could see it snowing and the city turning white. And it was like, this is like picturesque and beautiful. And I'm like, and I don't miss it at all. It's I did 11 Midwestern winters. I think I served my time. I
did 11 tours.
Yeah, that was enough.
Well, when you decided to take it to Milwaukee, I mean, that was
two in Milwaukee too. So
that's like 5.
Because Bloomington's really not that bad comparatively. I mean, we'll be honest.
No, not that bad at all. Not that bad at all. All right,
Andy, do you think you guys are in Cincinnati for good?
I would imagine so. I mean,
yeah.
Never say never, but yeah, I think that's what we would like. So this is the most snow we've gotten here, certainly since we moved back in a given winter, and maybe even counting the time that we lived here previously.
Yeah, my sister, she lives in Manhattan, or at least until the pandemic, she lived in Manhattan, but they have a house out in Connecticut that's kind of like a farm. It's like 20 acres, and they got about, I want to say almost 3 feet of snow from that last one that hit New York and hit that area. And she was just like sending pictures. And I was just like, wow, like that's the kind of snow where you have to get on your roof and like sweep it off or the roof's going to cave in. Like it was, it was bad.
Yeah. Nobody needs to be doing that. That's
that's yeah.
Absolutely unnecessary. Oh, well. All right. So we'll hit some kind of overarching Northwestern thoughts, some of the stuff that we emailed about, and then we can get into the remaining schedule, which, like I said, we don't need a ton of time for that part, so we can let the first part go a little bit if we're so inclined. And let's see. All right, let me check the time here. All right, I'm gonna go live here in just a second. We're at a good time.
This is Verdell Jones. What's better than an epic buzzer beater, the full court dribble, and perfectly placed pass to set it all up? And, of course, celebrating with Hoosier Nation afterwards. So join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the assembly call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
Welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content over at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to join the chat mob during our unedited live broadcast or watch those replays and see all the between segment banter, then check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Ryan Phillips and Scott Caulfield of CrimsonCast. And I guess, this is probably a good place to say, if you do join the chat mob, it can eventually lead to you being on the show. So, Chad stepped in, did a great job hosting after the Northwestern game, and Coach Marlowe and Kathy did a nice job after the day after the Iowa game. So appreciate everybody filling in as I've had a lot of basketball related commitments for my daughter lately. So appreciate them, and kudos to all of them for a job well done. So before we look at the remaining schedule, guys, I wanted to kind of talk briefly about last night's game. And Ryan, I think you alluded to this in your opening. The way I boiled the question down was essentially, how do you reconcile the fact that IU played poorly for really large stretches of the game, while also like giving them some credit for being able to come back, falling behind, coming back, getting a much needed road win, and kind of avoiding disaster in some ways. And Scott, I'll throw this to you first. I mean, how do you kind of look at that stuff together? I know you alluded to it a little bit in the opening, and kind of how do you put a performance like that into maybe the larger picture of your thoughts about where the program is right now?
I mean, I think your point, what you just said is interesting, like avoiding disaster. It feels like that's what we've been doing for a couple of years, especially this season. It's like we beat Iowa and then we immediately turn around and lose to Rutgers. And it's like we beat Iowa again. It's like I think all of us were looking at this. And I knew I was coming on here before the Northwestern game. And I'm like, if we lose Northwestern, like the show is going to be easy because I can just go on and just rail on everything that I'm feeling. This becomes a little bit harder because, we won. So you have to kind of reconcile that. But, a couple things here. It's like I know that, and Jared had a good thread on the Assembly Call Twitter about, how a win is a win and kind of, we should still be happy with wins. And I get that. But it's like, I'm not a 5th century monk here. Like, this is supposed to be fun. Like, this isn't penance that I'm supposed to like take in and be slapping myself on the back with, a thing with spikes on it. It's like, this is supposed to be fun. I'm supposed to enjoy this. And like, that game just wasn't fun to watch. Like, it wasn't fun basketball. I think, Andy, you had a great tweet halfway through. It's like, my DVR says it's basketball, but like nothing on the screen says it is, or I'm paraphrasing you. But it's like, they're not fun to watch. And watching us barely beat basically you said avert disaster barely isn't what I call like a great expectation for the year. There's a lot of harbingers that are just not great. 707 days. I just figured it out. That's the last time we won 3 Big Ten games in a row. So like, let's go for that this weekend. Like, that would be nice. It was 2019, March 7th, the last time we won 3 Big Ten games in a row. Like, we all know the Purdue thing haven't won. It just feels like we haven't had just an extended period of like, I feel good about where we are with basketball at IU and things are going well. Like, it's like, we beat Iowa, and I feel like a lot of people where it's like, okay, great. Can you do it again? And that's my takeaway from this Northwestern game. My big one is not that Northwestern's bad because they are, not that we played bad for the most part because we did. It's like, I don't know with this team at all what you can take away from anything. Cause you're right. Like, Al Durham played really well. Is that replicatable? Like, is he going to do it again? Trayce Jackson-Davis has played really well for the last like 2 or 3 games, and he's played really badly. Is that going to turn around? Rob Fennessy seems to be off on an island. I want happy Rob back who's hitting game-winning shots. Can that happen? Armand Franklin has improved a lot this year, but he's also had a couple of games where he's had some clunkers. The ability of getting everyone together is tough. And then you have, the freshmen who are playing like freshmen, which we expect, but nobody's really standing out. But that's kind of the part where it's tough for me to just say, okay, I feel great about beating Northwestern, because it's like, all right, can any of this be replicated or move forward to Ohio State? Like, Ohio State's a much better team. Can we play better against them? Like, it's on the road, so maybe that's good. I don't know. We don't play well at home anymore. Like, we come home from Minnesota and Michigan State. Like, can we bring any of that? Like, that's the frustrating thing for me just this season is it's like game to game, nothing seems to roll over, and everything. It's like, oh, great. Al Durham had a great game. He might score 2 points this weekend. And so I just don't know where to put any of this in context with anything. So there you go. That's a long way to say is, shrug shoulders emoji.
Ryan, what about you?
It's just, it's hard to watch the way they played and to see, first of all, to watch the way they played on the road against Iowa. In a tough environment. Being on the road anywhere is a tough environment, a long way from home. That's not a close road trip. They went there, they played stellar defense, found so many different guys to contribute offensively, have Rob Fennessy go off for maybe the best game of his career with 18 points and playing stellar defense and all of that, and then have it completely disappear over the next couple games. And it's they beat Iowa again at home, but Iowa really didn't play well. And you're still, again, you're happy with the win because they went and beat a good team, beat them, and then you go on the road and you just lay an egg, and then you do barely win it because 2 of your guys rescue you. Now, look, there are going to be games where you need guys to rescue you. I mean, that's in the especially in the Big Ten. It's a tough conference, but other teams figure out how to win these games, and other coaches. I mean, I'm not trying to turn this into an Archie session, but other coaches figure out how to have their teams prepared to play every time they step on the floor. And every team has leaders who prepare them to be ready to go on the floor. And there's consequences if it's not ready to go, whether it's your teammates getting into you or it's your coaches getting into you or whatever. And you don't see this repeated. Now, the bottom feeders of the conference don't have that, but the good teams do. So what does Indiana have to do to go from being a middle of the road or lower tier middle, team to getting better? You have to consistently win games like that. And you have to leave no doubt. You have to finish games. They finished against Northwestern, but they've really struggled to finish all season in big games. It just feels like this is a team that plays down to its competition and then plays up to its competition. But then when it does play up to its competition, against the better teams, they've really struggled to finish, except against Iowa. So it's almost like they're losing games they shouldn't lose. And then they're losing games where they're in it at the end and should maybe have plenty of chances to win and just for some reason don't. And it's just, there's no consistency. It's frustrating. And you get bits and pieces that are positive, but then you have these overwhelming negatives constantly in the background. So it's hard. You're happy with the win. Like when they won yesterday, I was happy that they won, but then you look at the game and you say, I mean, what is there here that's positive other than Al and Armand stepping up late? Like you want to see whole team positives like you saw in that road win against Iowa. And those are just few and far between with this team.
Yeah, I think the challenge is ultimately in what a lot of what you guys said. It's the kind of lack of progression or building on from one game to the next and making some of those differences. And so every time, even when we come on here after a good game, it just feels to me like everybody just wants to keep the team at arm's length because they've seen enough of the flaws, that they've seen enough of the inconsistency to say, I refuse to let myself get sucked into really believing this team is going to turn the corner. And to be fair, to this point, that's worked because they haven't really done that. But I think it's that lack of consistency that really makes it hard for people to buy in and kind of enjoy it, because you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop at some point and figure out what's going to happen in the next game. And so I've found myself the same way last night sitting watching the game. Once you got past the first half was an abomination, an affront to the game of basketball, but
it was abysmal.
Once you get past some of that and you really get into the flow of the game, like I let myself get into get excited about them coming back and being excited about that part. I think it's just, the expectations are high. They're not meeting those. And so consistently. And so I think it becomes is that blocking you from then being able to enjoy anything, even the higher points or the comebacks or whatever. And I think that's for every fan, I guess, to decide on their own, like where they come down on that side of the argument, in terms of what they do. But I don't blame people for getting frustrated by it, because it is frustrating to watch and you do wish that there was more consistency. And I don't, but I also am watching the games for entertainment, and this year has brought a lot of perspective that there are a heck of a lot of things more important than a college basketball game. So I maybe can move on a little bit easier when things don't go the way that I would want them to. But I think what everybody wants to see is developing that consistency, both from an individual player standpoint, knowing that not everyone is going to have a great game every single night out. You're going to have off games, but just the defensive effort kind of waning, at different points through the game, and then really ratcheting up at other points. And some of those things, I think that ultimately is what has people frustrated and what leaves people with an inability to really fully buy into the team, which perhaps is unfair. But I think as I try to put myself in other people's shoes, like I think it's pretty easy to see why people would keep this team at arm's length, would doubt it, would whatever you want to say.
Well, and one thing you said is that, expectations are high. I would disagree. I think expectations are mediocre. I mean, we're hoping just to go 500 in the Big Ten. But I will say this is probably a topic for off season, but I think this goes to a larger point that, when I looked at football this year, to me, the two biggest things in football is like when we beat Michigan, it's like people are like, oh, this is for real. Like, this isn't just a crazy reach against Penn State. Like, this is actually going to happen. Then, like, we went and, like, Penix goes out and we beat Wisconsin. It's like, oh, like, this is for real, for real. Like, this is, like, actually a good team. That is, you mentioned entertainment a couple of times. Like, that is the thing that I would say has been a problem under the Archie era, is just like the inability to do things that are like just a perception that looks good. Like this team, they win these games against Iowa and they go out and lose to Rutgers. And, how you win matters. And like, you come out, you don't score for 5.5 minutes. It's like, are we like, you struggle to beat Northwestern? I mean, part of sports is kind of like being able to talk smack with your friends and like, oh, like, we're taking them down. Like I'm getting off the trail here, but like, I noticed this on Twitter last night. Like, it just seemed like there's less people kind of bantering about it on Twitter. Like, I know, and maybe our podcast sucks, maybe people don't like us. I know that our listenership is down like a lot this year compared to football, like of all things. Like, football is getting more listeners. Like, I just think overall there's a lack of interest in IU basketball because we haven't been as great, as relevant or as good, but also like you mentioned, that people are keeping this team at arm's length, and it's kind of like, I'll just watch the Pacers, I'll do something else. It's like, I'm not going to get super invested because the team doesn't seem to care, or it's like, nobody feels like this is really going to lead to anything. And I think, again, this is probably a conversation for offseason, but I think that is the single biggest thing that IU athletics needs to worry about going into the offseason and next year, is this just general malaise of, where the fan base is and just lack of interest based on games like this. I mean, how you win matters sometimes even more than just not if you win, but how you win matters.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And I think it is, these last 6 games, that's probably as good a segue as any to kind of talk through the last 6 games on the schedule and what that means. But the way those go is going to really, push people in one direction or the other. If things go really poorly, either way, I think that these 6 games are going to go a long way toward determining what the tone is of that conversation that you talked about in the offseason. But let's talk quickly about what IU has left, at least what we know at this point. So right now they sit at 11-8. 6-6 in the Big Ten. They've got 6 remaining games scheduled. At this point, no word on whether or not the games at Michigan and at Michigan State will be rescheduled. It looked like tonight the Big Ten has rescheduled one of the games Nebraska missed. So I'm not sure if that's on the back burner. I don't really know. As you look, so starts this weekend at Ohio State. That's a quad 1 game. Minnesota at home, as of this morning, was a quad 2 game. Michigan State at home, which is actually a quad 3 game. Then at Rutgers, quad 1, Michigan at home, quad 1, at Purdue, quad 1. So IU sits at 45th in the net as of this morning. They're 2-7 in quad 1 opportunities, with both those wins coming in Iowa. 3 of the losses did come in overtime. You've got 5-0 against quad 2, and then 2-1 against quad 3 with that Northwestern game, the lone loss. And it's funny if you look and say, if they don't lay an egg against Northwestern at home and you win even one of those overtime games that falls in quad 1, like how differently you might feel about this. And I think that's the other part, is we, kind of tie in the prior discussion. Some of this
13
is
and 6.
not coming out in and you're 7-5 in the Big Ten. You'd be 8-4 in the Big Ten, assuming one of the overtime games you won was either the Illinois or the Wisconsin game and not the Florida State one. But yeah, you'd look at that and I think you'd frame it differently. I think you'd maybe be a little bit more apt to say, this clunker on the road against Nebraska was not great, or against Northwestern was not great, but look at these other games they won. So it's kind of interesting to look at it that way. In the bracket matrix, as of February 10th, IU was in 92 of the 101 brackets that were submitted. They were basically the highest 11th seed, so that'd make them 41st on the seed list. So in the field, but not safely in by any stretch. So as you look at these last few games, Ryan, I mean, what's your sense of what is feasible for this team to accomplish, and maybe which game or games are the swing games of that sequence?
Well, you've got to beat Minnesota and Michigan State, I think, given that that's a quad 2 and a quad 3. I mean, you have to win those. And Michigan State's a talented team. They just had no guard play. And if those guards figure it out, that becomes a much more difficult game. So, you've put yourself with some losses, again, at home to Rutgers, against Purdue, getting smacked around. Like, you lose those games and you put yourself in a situation where you might have to beat a talented team that finds its footing late in Michigan State. You've got to beat Minnesota. There's no question. Minnesota beat Purdue. I mean, that's not a terrible team. You've got to beat them both. And then I feel like at Purdue is one you've got to target. And then at Rutgers, I mean, you played even with Rutgers at home, essentially, and Trayce Jackson-Davis did not play a good game in that game, and a couple of other guys didn't, and you came out flat. That's a team you can play with. You've just got to go do it, and especially with Armon Franklin feeling better and looking much better. So those are the three. The Minnesota, Michigan State, and Rutgers are the ones you've got to look at and think, all right, We don't have to win all three. We got to win two of these. But I think that Minnesota, Michigan State, and then Rutgers and or Purdue, both of those games are on the road, and you've put yourself in this position where you've got to win them,
Yeah, Scott, how do you approach these last six?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Ryan said. I would also say, I mention this all the time, I know it's weird for an IU fan to think this. We are allowed to win games in the Big Ten tournament. Like, I know we don't do it, and I know it just isn't something we like to do. But I mean, if you can make a run to they play a semifinal in the Big Ten tournament. I know as an IU fan, we don't know what happens after the second round. Like, they actually play a second round and a semifinal. They play a finals. Like, it's insane. They have a finals of the Big Ten tournament. They have a trophy. They have confetti, everything, orange slices for all the winners.
Do you get a banner for it? Like,
I'm gonna have to. We'll get our research team on this. I'm not sure everything Scott claims is accurate, but anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Tom Crean gave banners for making the Big Ten tournament. That would also be a nice thing. A couple wins in the Big Ten tournament would be key. I think Ryan highlighted all the cool the important games. What I think is really interesting. I mean, your mission is this. Like, you've given yourself a very small window. You're going to have to win some games that are tough. You got to make the tournament. Like, there is no excuses. Like, you have to make whatever you have to do. You have to make the tournament. What's kind of interesting to me that Galen and I talked about in our last pod, last year's tournament is kind of this almost tack on that becomes whatever this year's is. So if we make the tournament this year, it's like, all right, well, Archie made it 2 out of 4 years. It's like, all right, you're at least showing some progression. If we don't make it this year, then it's kind of like, all right, well, we have never made the tournament. Like, we didn't make it for all 4 years. So like last year almost becomes whatever this year is what last year is.
It's like following a strike in bowling. Like, whatever happens next is what's important. Yeah.
No, it's 100% true, because you make it this year, it's like, all right, well, last year was a make, and you just count it. Like, last year is going to be whatever it is. So but more important, you have to make the tournament. So it's like, I don't care. It's like, oh, it's tough. Like, if you get down to like, you need to win Michigan and Purdue, like, you got to win those 2 games. Like, whatever you got to do, you got to do it to get in the tournament. But I think, again, the Big Ten tournament is going to give you some options to get some wins. And if you can make a nice little run to the Big Ten tournament, there's no reason why this team theoretically couldn't make a run. They played well against a lot of teams, and like Ryan said, they play up to their opponents. They also play down. Like, you can't lose in the first round, but they might be able to knock off a seed. Again, it's based on stuff I'm not sure is actually going to happen, but I would think that a little run in the Big Ten tournament would help too.
Yeah, and one thing to clarify real quick, because I know Andy, you want to chime in here, but losing at home to Illinois in overtime, losing to Rutgers at home, and losing to Northwestern at home has put you in this position. You made your bed. Now you have to prove that you can get out of it.
Well, the interesting thing is with the way the schedule's played out. I mean, you who knows whether these games get rescheduled, but you've tipped your scales toward having more home games than road games. If you only end up playing the 18 game, end up playing 18 games, you'll play 10 of them at home. So you've actually somehow given yourself an advantage that you've in some ways failed to take advantage of. I mean, when I look at this, I agree with you, Ryan, what you said. I think the ones that you feel like you definitely need to win are Minnesota at home, Minnesota has really struggled on the road, has played really well at home, obviously, and beat Purdue today. And then Michigan State at home. I think those are, I don't want to say non-negotiable, because if you won the other 4, you could probably do whatever you wanted in those. And then to me, you put yourself in a pretty precarious position if you lose the other 4, even though they're all quad 1 games. If you end up 2-11 in quad 1 opportunities, at some point that says
you got to win
games
games at some point.
You just can't beat good teams. It's great to get the opportunity. So to me, I think you got to win at least one of the others just to give yourself, that even puts you 3-10, which doesn't sound very good, quite frankly. I think if you could find a way to split those, you end up 4-9 against quad 1, 6-0 against quad 2, and then 3-1 against quad 3. You'd feel pretty good. The Big Ten tournament, as Scott said, will be another opportunity where you're not going to play a team that a loss is going to hurt you, but it's another good quality win opportunity. So I think those 2 home wins are ones you got to get. And then if you can find a way to get a couple of the others, then I think you'd feel pretty safe, because that would give you at least one really strong road win to add to one that you've already gotten against Iowa. So that's how I look at it. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with those other games, if they get rescheduled or not. And the Michigan game, who knows what they're going to look like after a long layoff. I know that game is a lot later in the season for IU, but we've seen teams struggle to get back into a bit of rhythm. Clemson had that where they struggled for a little while coming back. It took them a while to get back to the way that they were playing. So that'll be something to watch as they get back into action. All right. So with that, we'll wrap up and we'll get ready to answer your questions when we come back. The mediocre question of the week returns. So we'll start there, and then we've got another one about TJD's pro prospects. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right, we are not going to have a lot of time left for these questions.
Yeah, keep an eye on the chat, Scott. He'll cut us off in there.
Yeah,
that's
we went long, but it was good. No, we all went long.
No, that wasn't
good discussion.
No, that wasn't. Yeah, it was nothing with you. But yeah, we've only got. Oh boy, this math. This is terrible.
I don't do time. So we're just, I don't do prep. Like, this is crazy. I'm talking about our podcast before we do it. Like, this is so un-CrimsonCast like. By the way, everyone who's on the chat mob on YouTube, I see you guys. For whatever reason, I can't comment. Like, I'm trying to write stuff. And
you have to sign in, I think.
I am.
You've been blocked. You've been blocked, Scott. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, I've been blocked. Yeah. It's like Willie Mays Hayes in Major League. Like, shit, I've been cut already.
God, I love that movie. I can't wait for spring training to start up so I can watch it again.
Can't wait to watch it.
Madeline's never seen it.
What age? What age do I show that to my son? I mean, I say 8.
How old is he now? He's 8.
8. Yeah.
I saw it when I was.
I saw it when I was like 9. Like,
when did that come out? What year did that come out?
89, 88.
Yeah, I think I saw it right after it came out. So I was probably about 9. Yeah, 8 or 9.
Oh, I have so many. Oh my God. All right, hold on. This is all right, Ryan. So my two things with this are with Major League. I love the movie. I mean, I'm like one of my favorite movies of all time.
Bob Uecker should have won an Oscar for it.
Yes. But I have a Bob Uecker story that we can talk about after this podcast.
After dark.
God, what was? I haven't seen it in so long. No, there's no reason why. First off, the game should have been played in New York. Like, they only play the Yankees and the Indians played like 5 times that year. Every time Clue Haywood bashed it out of the park.
Yes.
Like, there's no tiebreaker the Indians have over that. But Ricky Vaughn knows he's not pitching, or like he knows he's not starting. He's a starting pitcher. Like, the entire movie, he's a starting pitcher.
Yes. He's coming in relief at some points early on.
Some points.
Very early.
But then the rest of the year, he's a starting pitcher, bunch of strikeouts, like almost winning the Cy Young, cover of SI.
Yes.
Why on earth would, and by the way, if it's like, and I haven't watched baseball in a while, but Andy Pettit and Roger Clemens are in the starting lineup. If like Andy Pettit's not pitching that game, if I'm running the scoreboard, all of this, like, I'm not prepared for Pettit to come in on relief. And if I am, I sure as hell don't have a song just lined up. And then also, like, there's like 12 people in stands with like the Wild Thing sign. Like, who goes to a game when like the starting pitcher who's not a reliever is like, I'm just going to bring my Wild Thing sign just on the off chance. By the way, in 88, when like relievers, like, you have like Dennis Eckersley and that was it. Like, there wasn't like a whole bullpen of guys. Like, you didn't bring guys off the bench. Like, I don't know.
Starting an opener. Yeah.
You're going to bring an opener in. Like, I don't get that.
And here's the thing: the trend of starting pitchers going to the bullpen in the playoffs, like for a big game, didn't start until the late 90s. Like, Randy Johnson came out of the bullpen one time because it wasn't his turn in the rotation, but he could give you a couple innings. I was a Padres fan. Kevin Brown in the 98 playoffs did that. And everyone was like, oh, it's so exotic and weird and different. So yes, maybe it was just an influential movie, Scott. And they had read the analytics and said, you know what, if you can get your best pitcher in for a couple innings.
They did the analytics based on Major League so that they could be like, this guy, that's
where Bill James got his whole idea from.
Yeah.
Free analytics. I love it. I also got to say, my wife and I went to a Cleveland game in like 2008 or something, and there was a dude in like a retro Ricky Vaughn jersey. I'm like, I love it. Like,
it's so great. Yeah.
Fucking love that.
And you know the reason why it's in Milwaukee and not New York, right? Why the game is in Cleveland, not New York, is because they were filming it at Milwaukee's County Stadium, and that's the only stadium they could get to film at for actual baseball scenes. And so they couldn't do it at Yankee Stadium. They couldn't, and they had used that stadium for everything, even though I love the fact that they're supposed to be in Cleveland. They're using a division rival stadium as a regional rival stadium as the home stadium. It's like anybody from Cleveland who saw that movie is like, yeah, we don't like playing there. Like, but that became the stadium. And then they couldn't like change it and like try and dress it up as Yankee Stadium because it's the same stadium they've been using the whole movie. So yeah, I like, if you notice, like Cleveland like basically never plays a road game like in that movie. I mean, there's like one or two scenes where it shows them somewhere else, but it's like barely, and they cut angles weird and stuff.
I knew it was in Milwaukee. And I actually went to a couple Brewers games with my dad. And I was
back at County Stadium. Yeah.
Oh yeah, this thing. And I'm pretty sure when they played the A's in that movie, they were using County Stadium.
Yeah, they just use like angles.
Yeah, they use like different angles and stuff. Yeah. And I mean, but no, the movie's ahead of its time. You're right. Analytics, moving teams to Florida, like, you know, hopping around, like it's great. Oh god.
No, my favorite part though, the whole spring training.
This guy here is
section.
dead.
The whole spring training section is the best part of that movie, in my opinion. Like, I just love so many of those little things. And
can I show you what my wife got me for a present once?
Yeah. Please. This is great. We're talking baseball on a basketball podcast. I love it.
This is the LP.
Is it the soundtrack?
This is the soundtrack. This is the LP. So when I worked at WIUS, I had a radio show, Scott's Sports Talk or whatever. It was like awful college radio. But I played the song, like the instrumental song they use, like when they're making their run, like dun dun dun. It's like that was my intro song for it, because I'm like, A, it's like college radio. Who the hell's going to sue me? And B, it's like I just love that song. But I thought that was it's a great instrumental, like as they're making their run, like dun 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 dun. Like, why no one else has used that? So I used to play this on this LP at WIUS, and then I was telling my wife about it one time. Like, I wish I had that record. And she found me the album. So there you go.
I will say, okay, so my two big sports movie takes are: one, Bob Uecker should have won an Oscar for Major League, and two, Wilford Brimley should have won an Oscar for The Natural. Those are my two.
Okay.
Those are my two, and I stick to those 100%.
So we'll keep this real quick. The Bob Uecker story. So when I was living in Houston, I got with a buddy, and he was big into autographs. And so I started doing a bunch of autographs. So I have like 100 autographed baseballs in my basement. Like President Bush, like Nolan Ryan, Roger Clemens. I've got a ton of people. The Brewers are coming through. And so Bob Uecker, I was like, holy shit, like I love him. And he's just like kind of smiles, like, I got Bob Uecker. I'm like, okay. He's like, go get him. Good times. So I go up to Uecker. I'm like, hey, Mr. Uecker, I let you know, because we know where the media comes out. He's like, kid, I don't have time. He's like, I don't have time to sign a fucking baseball. I'm like, all right. But he kind of looks at me, and he's like, just kind of pushes me. Like, we start walking. He's like, I got fucking time. He's like, come, like, he's like, push me to walk, but yelling at me. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And like, he's like, give me the baseball. I was like, you think that's all I fucking, like, just ripping my ass up, takes the ball, and like, just beautiful signature right across the sweet spot, like hands it back to me. He's like, all right, man, thanks. Have a good day. And I'm like, what just happened? And my buddy Chris is like, dude, that's Uecker does it to everybody. He's like, I think it's like he treats you like an asshole, but then he still signs for you. It was one of the coolest experiences where it's like Bob Uecker was ripping my ass, but then also like signing perfect. I will also say, last thing, then I'm done. At the All-Star game in 2005, Ricky Henderson was there, and the best signing story ever is just Ricky Henderson going down the line being like, Ricky Henderson signs that bat. Like, Ricky signed that ball. Then the exact same ball. Like, Ricky don't sign that ball. Ricky signed that ball. And just like, no rhyme or reason. Like, Ricky signed that bat. Like, Ricky signed that helmet. Like, Ricky don't sign that hat. Ricky signed that hat. And just like, people are getting out of their mind pissed. And it was so funny. Because like, why won't you sign this ball? Like, it's the same ball he has. Like, man, Ricky don't sign that ball. Ricky signed that ball. And it's like, it was the greatest thing.
I have a great Ricky Henderson story for after the show.
Okay. Yes.
Oh boy.
Andy, you've lost control.
No, well, we have. That's okay. All right, so we only have like 3.5 minutes. So if we only hit,
we'll do the mediocre question.
We'll do J's if we get through it fast enough, and we want to hit the TJD one real fast. Fine. If not, we can always we'll hit a couple after the show.
Okay.
All right. Let me see if we're at a good. It's about to start. Yes, we are. All right.
This is Nick Zeisloft. I never miss an open three, and I never miss an episode of The Assembly Call.
And welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Ryan Phillips and Scott Caulfield. And remember, you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU news roundup, even during the offseason. And after every game, we send out a detailed post-game analysis. Just text IU to 6866 or go to assemblycall.com. Again, that's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. Now time for our mailbag. All questions submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community, which you can find out more about at assemblycall.com/community. And we have the triumphant return of...
It's not that good, but it's not that bad. It's Jay's mediocre question.
All right. Nothing says mediocre question by not submitting one for arguably the last 3 months. But Jay asks, if you could change one thing and only one thing that would improve how IU starts games, what would it be? His suggestion: stop force feeding TJD in the post to start every game. Feels like he rushes his first few shots of the game because he knows the ball is coming to him. Badly wants to get the team off to a good start. And instead run some action for Al or Armand to get the ball going downhill and coming off screens in the position to shoot. Let TJD work his way into the game. All right, Ryan, quick thoughts on what you would change to help IU start games better.
I disagree. I think they need to force feed Trayce to get him started, because if you don't get Trayce started, sometimes he wanders through the first half. I think you need to get him started. What I would also do is run some downhill action where you put Armand Franklin in the corner and get somebody to drive and make them help off of Armand, leaving him open in the corner for a three. Same with Al. I would really try and corner your best shooters and drive off of that. The problem is Rob Finney, not a great driver. And he hasn't shown the willingness to drive full speed downhill. But if you need to use Christian Lander for that or someone else, I think you really need to start going downhill.
Scott, what about you?
I would say whatever you do in the Northwestern game, just do the opposite. It's like George Costanza. Just whatever you see at Northwestern, I'm going to do the opposite. And next thing you know, you're going to be up 25-0.
It's interesting. I do feel like they ran a set play for Armand out of that one timeout when it was that I alluded to in the banner moment when it was 62-57 and
he hit the three.
Had him, catch it. Yeah, catch it at the top of the key. They've run plays for him before, and it's been effective. They don't do it very often, and I think it always generates some jeers on Twitter, as does virtually everything. But if like, hey, finally you ran a play for a guy to shoot the ball, and it paid off, and you did some of that. I think part of it to me is a lot of just the pace, and that I think ultimately is the reason a lot of people like watching Lander play, because it's just a different pace of play, and it inherently makes things look like they're running a little bit smoother, even if they're not. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that to advocate starting him in the game, but I think the pace that they play in some of these situations just kind of allows the game to grind down and not really getting guys in the flow as much. But we'll see. Any quick thoughts? We got 10 seconds. Any other ideas that you just came up with? I guess
start
not.
making shots.
That would be a good one.
Hit threes. Hit multiple threes.
That is crazy. We can't. All right.
That's it. We're done. No more questions.
All right. That seems like a good place to end with that crazy idea of making shots. So thanks everybody for joining us on this week's edition of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. Special thanks to Rob Thompson for producing much of the music that you heard on the show. And thanks to you for listening. We'll be back on Saturday after the Ohio State game. Until then,
take it from me, Max Bielfeldt. Keep your calves flexed, your elbows in, and your eyes on the rim. Enjoy.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
All right, we can hit these other questions here as we go. Yeah, I definitely don't. I'm not advocating for Lander to start, but the difference in the pace of play and that the offense runs is night and day for sure.
Yeah, it is.
All right. So Sally's question, there's been a lot of talk about Trayce not being ready for the NBA. Let's just assume that is true. What are the pros and cons of him staying another year at IU or getting the training he needs in the G League? Isn't that the purpose of the G League? I know, Scott, you had said we were emailing before, you had some thoughts on this. So I'll throw this one to you first.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, to me, it's, and we're off now. I can cuss now, right? So I'm free to.
I mean, you were before in the middle, so yeah. Yeah, I don't know what the I don't know what the rules are. I don't know what the rules are on that.
Just
so
don't.
I marked a couple in case Jared needs to.
Yeah. All right, sorry.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'm a bad.
No, you're okay.
Bad influence. No,
well, it's taken this long. We're actually impressed with you for waiting.
Yeah, I know this is pretty good. My points.
I mean, the Euchre story had a few, so let's not pat ourselves on the back too much with that. I mean, we didn't like.
I mean, he's been a guest before and never done it.
I got you.
So I'm impressed it only.
I thought you meant today. I was like,
I'm going to do it in the after dark, in the breaks, the after dark breaks. No, here's my thing. I think this is Archie. Like, Archie's got to get a guy who's this talented to be drafted. And you've got to put him in positions where he can show what he's doing. The fact he hasn't taken a 3 this season is criminal. He's not good at it, but he's not going to get better by not doing it. And that's what the NBA wants to see, coming in at whatever he is, like 6'8", as a guy who only shoots 3 feet from the hoop. That's not going to get you drafted. So to me, it's like, this is on Archie to get. This is not a good sign if you can't get Trayce Jackson-Davis with the skills that he has drafted in the first round. Here's what I would say. I put him always in like the Christian Watford category. And I'm so happy Watford came back because he hit a shot against Kentucky, which was great. But you had a spot where Watford, after his junior year, I said it at the time, I say it now, I stand by it. Watford was going to be a professional basketball player, and he was. Not in the NBA, but he's going to play basketball professionally and make money playing basketball in other countries, which is awesome. It's better than 98% of people who ever play basketball are able to do. He did not get any better at IU his senior year that made him a better draft prospect.
Yeah, the only thing he got better at was defense, and that was mildly better. It wasn't like
and he hit a 3. I mean, honestly, I kind of said the same thing for Yogi Ferrell. Like, I think after Yogi's junior year, it's like, this is as good as he's going to get. He only has so many years in those knees. Go get paid, man. Go get your money. I feel that same way with Trayce Jackson. Like, he should go pro. He may not get drafted. He may get drafted at the end of the second round, but like, honestly, you're seeing it now. He's not going to get any more skills that would make him employable in the NBA at IU. He's just not, because he's got to shoot threes. He's got to play more exterior, perimeter defense. He's not doing that. And I do think people have a very narrow view of what professional basketball is. Like, the NBA,
you can make really good money overseas.
Dude, Jeff Newton's like in the Japanese Basketball Hall of Fame. Like, Filipino. Like, I think it's Japan. Like, he's in. Anyway, you can make a ton of money. You had Nick Zeisloff earlier. He's still playing in like Greece or something. You can make a ton of money being a professional basketball player in other countries. There's no fault to it. You can do it in the G League. I would love for him to stay, but I think as a basketball player, for his progression, the best thing for him to do is start being coached by professionals.
Yeah, I would say this about Trayce, and I've heard nothing contrary. He's going pro after the season, unless he just all of a sudden decides, well, all my friends are here, I kind of want to run it back with my friends, which is not a bad decision if that's for the life experience of getting to play with his friend, because he's close with a lot of these guys now that are on the team that were a year younger than him, or 2 years younger than him in Lander's case. And he just decides, this is what I want to do. That's the only way he's coming back. He's not coming back because he needs to get better, because here's the thing. Look at Thomas Bryant. Thomas Bryant went to the NBA, was drafted far lower than he should have been. He was a 6'10" guy with skill, and he was drafted late, and the Lakers snagged him with a second-round pick because they were like, we cannot believe he fell this far. Guy was a lottery pick the year before. He dropped because Indiana had a bad season, not because he was bad. It was because he was pretty much the same guy, and he even added a little bit, but he fell because Indiana was terrible his last year. And he went to the G League and turned himself into a starting NBA center within a few months. I mean, had the Lakers not already had a pretty good situation in the low post, he would have been playing for the Lakers. Instead, they had to release him because of a salary cap crunch. He goes to Washington, and within a few weeks, he's their starting center after the next season. The reason why is because when you leave college, you get to focus 24 hours a day on being a professional basketball player. And you get to work with you get to hire coaches individually to help you work out. You get to work, with a team that hires people specifically to make you better. It changes the calculus. You may not get drafted, but you can become an exponentially better basketball player working with professional coaches and focusing full-time on training and on developing your skill sets, things that you're prohibited from doing by the NCAA. And so that's why you see guys go pro, even if they're not going to get drafted, or they're a second round pick, or they're, it's a guy who's a lottery talent, but he goes in the 20s and he knows he's going to go in the 20s. And while you could come back and get better, it's a lot harder to get better in college than it is to get better at the professional level. Some guys do it. Some guys come back. I mean, I disagree with you, Scott. I think Yogi Ferrell got a lot better between his junior and senior years. And I would agree with you at the time, maybe viewing it after his junior year is like, well, look at his size, look at his restrictions. He became a much better 3-point shooter his senior year, and he became a guy who could take over games, which he wasn't. He was occasionally as a junior, but he became, almost, in contention for National Player of the Year. So I would say that's a rare example of where like a guy later in his career got way better. Guys between their freshman and sophomore years get way better all the time. They say, that's the saying, and it sticks all the time. The best thing about freshmen is they become sophomores, and you've seen it with Armand Franklin. Look at the jump he's taken and become better now. But for certain guys, they're not going to get that much better in a college setting. They need, like Trayce Jackson-Davis needs his entire game worked on, because he needs to be able to hit a 15-footer consistently. Heck, he needs to be able to hit a 3-point shot occasionally, and he needs to become better, moving his feet and things like that he's just not going to get in Indiana, I don't think. And so I would say, yeah, it's the obvious move for him to take the next step, because he's not going to take the next step in college. I don't think. I think he could be a very dominant college player doing the kinds of things that he's doing and getting marginally better every year, but he's not going to become a better future professional at the college level.
The last thing I'll say about Jackson-Davis, sorry, Andy, but just that I will say about that I think is a real problem that we have moving forward. And the same thing with Christian Lander is, you have a guy in Jackson-Davis who's a talent and was a stud recruit coming out. And honestly, I hate saying this, if he would have gone to Kentucky, he'd just be catching lobs and would have been a first-round pick last year. The fact that he's not barely in the second round in most draft projections may not get drafted, like, to me, that's a huge black mark on Archie Miller and his ability. If I'm a recruit, if I'm the next 6'10 guy, 6'8 guy who's a stud in high school, it's like, I'm not going to go there. That's a guy that he couldn't get Jackson-Davis drafted, and Romeo was injured, but he took a lottery pick, dropped him down. And then you have Christian Lander, he's not, you see him now. It's like, all right, we can't be starting, but it's like, dude, that's a 5-star who reclassified. 5-stars don't just reclassify to come sit in the bench and get 4 minutes. Like, this is another topic, maybe an offseason thing, but like, Archie's doing himself zero favors on getting these high level talents by getting guys dropping in the draft, not, putting getting Jackson-Davis in a spot where he's going to show off talents the NBA wants. And then honestly playing Lander more, like it's kind of this is, I've said it like 5 different times. I apologize. Like, my neighbor is a Michigan State fan, a friend of mine. The minute he heard we got Lander, he's like, well, that guy's gonna be starting for you next year. I'm like, are you sure? He's like, dude, that's the way it goes. It's like, but by the way, he has a lot more experience with 5-stars than I do. And I think that's the way as IU fans are, because I listen to IU fans, you can't play Lander, he sucks, can't play him. It's like, okay, but that's a 5-star. Like, he's got other friends who are 5-stars, and he's telling his friends right now, this sucks. Like, I reclassified because I wanted to go to the NBA in 2021. I wasn't expecting to play
2022.
Sorry, 2022.
Yeah.
But I wasn't expecting
he knew he was doing a 2-year thing. Yeah.
But I think these are all massive problems. If you can't get Jackson-Davis drafted in the first round after 2 years of the talent he has, something is wrong.
No, and they're very lucky that Boston took Romeo Langford as the last pick in the lottery, because they can still say, well, we had a lottery pick. But they're very lucky that he got taken where he was, because he was projected to go possibly 20. And that felt like a drop. But they're very lucky. They could still point to saying, hey, we produced a lottery pick. We produced Juwan Morgan, who became the first undrafted guy to ever start a playoff game, like undrafted rookie to start a playoff game. Like, they were able to sort of manipulate some things there and in their messaging. But if you're consistently taking guys who should be really good and having them not perform to that level, that's definitely a black mark.
All right, next question. We'll hit this next one, and then we can wrap up. So from Jerry, is there an off-court problem with this team? Hunter made it back on the court, made a big shot. Looked like a couple of the coaches were trying to calm him down when he was taken out near the end of the game. TJD had shown lousy body language past several games. It just looked totally uninterested last night. And finally, the whole team looked like it was Saturday night at the Y for all the first half and most of the second half. What's going on? I don't know that any of us is in a great position to truly assess things from that standpoint, but either of you guys have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, again, it's hard to say. I will say this is a young team, and Trayce Jackson-Davis having lousy body language at times. We've seen that before, but he's also 20. I had a lot of lousy body language until I was like 30. So, it's, they are kids, and that stuff's going to happen. And remember what they're dealing with constantly. And a lot of teams have had problems this year. They're constantly being tested. They're constantly locked down. A lot of college football teams opted out of bowl games because the players were tired of being, they basically weren't seeing their families. They were being tested constantly. They had to be locked down. They had months of just not seeing anybody but their teammates. I think that this is a weird year and it's starting to wear on people, and you've had other teams have issues too. And so I think that if you're worried about off the court stuff, I mean, there aren't any real off the court problems popping up. Obviously, whatever happened with Jerome Hunter, he upset the coaching staff. The coaching staff said he was going to have to work to get back in their good graces. He sat a game, dressed for another game, but didn't play, and then played against Northwestern. So whatever happened, he earned his way back onto the court. But I don't think that, all the reports we hear about this team is they're all really tight. They're all friends. They all get along. It's not a cliquey team where some guys are off doing their own thing and some guys are off doing their thing. Like, this is a tight team. They're just not performing on the court. I don't know what the disconnect is. And again, if you listen to if you listen to Archie Miller talk basketball, the guy knows what he's talking about. There's just a disconnect between imparting that wisdom and motivating the players, to do what he wants them to do. That's not letting him off the hook. I'm saying there's a problem with his communication there that's not working. But if you hear the guy talk about basketball, he knows basketball. He knows the system. He knows what he wants. You look at, statistically, his offense gets a lot of open, good looks, unguarded looks that they should be hitting. The players aren't making them. That's not letting him off the hook. He's got to develop these guys. So it's hard to know what's going on. But I can't sit here and say there's a big, off the court problem when we've got nothing reported that there was a big off the court problem with this team. I mean, when Kelvin Sampson was here, you could talk to pretty much anybody who went to school at Indiana and they knew there were problems with that team off the court. It was not a quiet thing. I lived in Bloomington at the time. I was no longer in school, and even I knew what was going on. So it's when those things happen, you hear about them. We haven't really heard anything about this team having problem children.
Yeah, I think I fall in line with what you said, where everything that you hear is that this team gets along really well, as good as any team in recent years. And so, yeah, I don't view anything off court necessarily as a reason for the sluggish starts. That's certainly something that has to get fixed and is a recurring theme and a recurring problem. But I don't necessarily attribute it to off court stuff. And to your point, that's not anything that's really been floated around. Even, in other years, there's certainly been rumors about that kind of stuff that may or may not have, truly played a role in some things, but I haven't got wind of any of that kind of thing for this year.
I mean, I think this all goes hand in hand with just, the team isn't playing well and they're not really on a run. I mean, when Finney hit that winner against, who was it a couple weeks ago? I've even forgotten the game. So, he had a game winner. Like, the team looked fired up. Like, I mean, when Hunter hit that shot last night, like the bench was going nuts.
Went nuts.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you're finding is, like, just like we don't like grinding out a double overtime win against at Northwestern, they know it too. It's like, dude, Northwestern sucks. That arena's small. It's like, that's not fun. Like, they're gripping the bat. They know it's a big game. They know they just beat Iowa and they can't come back and lose Northwestern. Like, they're not on a run. You know what team is fun? If you go watch them, looks like they're having a good time. Gonzaga. Because they've won like 19 in a
It's
row.
easy to have fun when you're winning.
I mean, seriously, like, it's a, I joked earlier in the show about we haven't won 3 games in the Big Ten in a while. It's like, if we win 2 or 3 more in a row, the body language will go away. So I'm not saying it's a bad question, but it's kind of like teams that are kind of, we're sputtering. We're kind of playing well, playing not. Like, when they're playing well, they look fine. Like, when they're not, they're looking like they look like they're thinking too much. Like, this was a Tony Adranja thing on our pod, was like, they just need to play more pickup. And like, honestly, I see it with Finney the most. It's like, the minute I heard that's all I see with Finney as a guy who just needs to play. Like, stop thinking, just play. Go play pickup at the hyper. Like, stop thinking about anything. Like, honestly, Finney probably shouldn't be coached right now. It's like, just go play basketball, and stop thinking about what you're being told. But they look like they're nervous, they're tentative, and I think that shows. I think if they just got on a little streak, you would see the body language change.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, Gonzaga just plays free and easy, but it's somewhat easy to do when you're up by 18 points all the time and you don't need to.
Yeah. I mean, playing the West Coast helps too when you're playing like, San Diego and Pepperdine and Pacific. Good times.
Absolutely.
Hey, ease up on USD, huh? Their coaches tried to talk to me when I was in high school about it.
Nice.
It's a fine program. Only a fine program would.
One real quick one, Ryan, because I think I saw you answer this on Twitter at some point. Rick asked, is it safe to assume at this point that Parker Stewart is not going to play this year? Has he been practicing with the team? So have there been any reports about his game? I feel like I saw you answer something similar to this on Twitter or somewhere.
Parker has been practicing from what I understand. I don't know if he's doing full court stuff, but he's doing drills and stuff like that. I don't know if he's doing game plan stuff or what. But what I've been told by everybody is that he does not plan to play this year. And I think maybe if there were like massive injuries and he had to be forced into action, he would. But what that kid's been through during the last year, I'm glad he's not going to play. You know, I think you could use as many good basketball players as you can right now. But at the same time, I think that he's going to sit out from all indications I've heard. Now that could change. Of course, he could just wake up one day and say, you know what, I want to play. But given the loss of his father and all that stuff and the transfer and the emotional and probably some physical baggage associated with, you know, all of that stuff, I don't think he should play this year. I think he's a kid who needs to take a break from basketball and focus on his family. And so, you know, he's with the team, and I think that's probably going to be something that helps him get through whatever he's going through, just to give him something to do and not focus on it. But I think that, this is a kid who needs some time, and I think that I Indiana fans should respect that. Parker Stewart's going to play when he's ready to play, and Indiana fans should respect that.
Yeah, I think, and certainly the more games you go, the less likely you are to try to integrate a new piece outside of a dire situation like what you described, where you're, you know, really, really hampered by injuries or things like that. But at this point, you've really got 6 games left in the regular season. Like that, it just isn't the time to try to insert somebody new into the rotation. I think you already see that Archie struggles, I think, to figure out how to dole out the minutes when he wants to get some of the young guys minutes now. So you throw another guy in the mix of that, I think it just becomes that much more difficult. And to your point, Ryan, I think there's a lot of other factors that suggest probably taking this season off is going to be best for him in the short term and the long term, just in terms of letting himself get acclimated to the program and to Bloomington and all those kinds of things, and then be ready to come back and play next year. And
it's also kind of a weird year to like show up somewhere, you know, because it's not like he's getting to hang out at Knicks and kind of feel part of the community. You know, I mean, he's kind of, you know, stuck away from everything, and they're kind of in their own corridor. And I mean, it's great for getting to know your teammates, but at the same time, you know, there's no indication that he's comfortable in his new surroundings yet. He seems to be enjoying being on the bench with the team, and I think it's great that he's traveling with the team and being involved, and he's very excited every time they do something good. So I think that's a good step. But at the same time, you know, I think that we should be at the default setting that he's not going to play this year. And if he does, and if he's seems happy and great, awesome. But I think the default setting for every Indiana fan should be expecting, hey, he's not going to play this year, and that's the way it should be.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we hit most of the questions. You guys got anything else you want to hit real quick before we wrap things up?
No, I'm about to hit some dinner, and that's it.
All right. Fair enough.
Scott's always great having you on, man.
Yeah,
I appreciate it, Scott. Apologize for Andy for just completely taking over the show.
It happens. It happens.
No, anytime, man. I appreciate it. Either one of you guys, man, I want to get one of you on CrimsonCast, so let me know. I know Ryan, let's do it. I know Andy got a bunch of stuff. So
off season is definitely the best time, but let's do it. I'm for sure willing to come on. Okay. Are you guys? Cool. How often are you guys doing shows right now?
We took like 3 weeks off. We did one last week.
That's why
I think we're gonna try and do one this week. I was joking with Galen on our pod. I was like, there's a couple tells. Like, if you listen to Bill Simmons, he talks about the Celtics a lot. Like, you can tell when I hate our coaching staff or we don't like what's going on. Is like we just stopped podcasting. Like the last 2 years, it was like we did like 3 pods over like 18 months, and it's like now we're just. It's kind of like, I mean, because the way we do it is way less structured. You guys like. There's nothing. We're just hitting the same topic over and over and over again. Where it's
God, you're doing the Crean years for what we did during the Crean years. There were times we would get on after a post game, like after a game, to do the post game show, and Andy and I would both be. Jared's like setting up, and Jared's always positive, and he's always like,
"Yeah, I know."
All right, you know, and Jared's setting up, and Andy and I would both be like, "Why do we even do the show? We're just like, can we just replay last week's show?
Yeah, and just do a voiceover of the team, of the other team name."
Well, tonight the Hoosiers lost
today's
to
game against
Maryland.
You know?
Ohio State. Yeah. No, I mean, we're kind of at that.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm kind of mentally at that point just because I need to see I need to see them do something different. So like we didn't, you asked like what are we gonna do? Like to me, it's like you got to win out. Or so you've got to do something that just like is completely unexpected.
Well, that's the biggest issue. And I've heard from people in the athletic department. The biggest issue with the program right now is not what's going on the court. It's what's happening off the court with the fans. Like there is a malaise about this program.
It's legit.
And it's people are just, and they say like, and a couple of people I've talked to have said they wish it was more like people were angry. It's more just like people don't care. And that's the worst place to be in. Because if they're angry, you're like, okay, if we get it right, we have passionate fans ready to like back us. But when they're just kind of like, nah, I don't care.
Kind of just
like
numb to whatever happens.
Yeah, that's the worst place to be. And they feel like they're there right now. And it's bad. And again, winning cures everything. You win your last couple games and you make a run in the NCAA tournament, people are back on the bandwagon. But they just see right now, it feels like there's a real problem going on with excitement.
Yeah, and that's why I think, getting an 11 seed in the tournament, you got to make it, and like making the tournament is great, and that's not a bad thing. But getting an 11 seed, it's like, all right, again, like that's
here's the thing,
that's really going to get people fired up. It's like
if you look back, what's the most exciting thing that's happened to IU basketball in the last 4 years? It's getting Romeo Langford. That was the moment where the entire fan base was united in excitement. Since then, there've been some nice wins, but it's always been, they won, but they beat Michigan State. But, there've been these like downer things associated with it. The last time there was absolute jubilation was when they got Romeo. Since then, it's kind of been like,
that's what I've been saying is that season was such a disappointment, and that losing streak was so bad. It's like that was a subpar, like that was below average. You can't now just have back-to-back average years and like we're all good. It's like, no, you need to give me an above average year. Like that, you need to go above and beyond. Like that's why I said you got to win out and like win the Big Ten tournament, like win the next 12 games, like do something that is just completely unexpected, because you did the reverse 2 years ago where you just did something unexpectedly worse than I was expecting. You can't just now be average and finishing 9-11 2 years in a row in the Big Ten. But no, I feel the malaise. I mean, I see it talking with all of my other friends who are IU fans. Like, it's like people are just checking out. It's like, whatever. And it's, and now they're competing with other, I'm a half season ticket holder with the Pacers. And I've said this to my guys at the varsity club. I've said it to the Pacers. It's like, the Pacers treat me so much better than IU basketball does as a varsity club member. And I give about the same amount to both of them, except the Pacers are a business and they don't treat it as if like it's my right to have to give money to the varsity club. Little things like they're redoing the field house. Like I was down there 2 days ago. They gave me a private tour of it, and they're doing it for everybody. It's not like I'm special, but it's like they're treating me like I'm special because they know that my credit card needs to be special.
You're a paying customer.
When it comes time to run my check, and like, little things like I have a rep and they'll like come down. Like they know I'm bringing my son to a game. They'll bring a stuffed boomer. It's like, I have $2 from China. It's like, but it like all that stuff goes a long way. And with IU basketball, they just have never done that, because it's like this, you have priority points. Like, give us money to get your 12 points. Even now, like under the pandemic, sorry, I'm ranting. Like even now, like I'm getting letters.
That's my job, damn it.
I know. It's like, every $100 is 2 priority points. Like it's, keep your priority going. It's like, you got to like finesse this, because people are going to make some, like, now that I haven't paid for Pacers tickets for 12 months, part of me is like, well, do I really want to keep shelling out $4,000 a year for these tickets? And same thing with IU basketball and football. Like a lot of decisions are going to be made. I'm not getting rid of my tickets for IU basketball and football, but I think a lot of other people are looking at this like, well, I haven't done it for 12 months. Like why do I want to do it again?
If you have to drive to games that are already on TV, and there's just levels.
And then that goes to the perception of like, that's why I want to see us go and just kick the snot out of, kick the snot out of Northwestern. Like, that's why I don't want to go and drive down 2 hours to Assembly Hall, be treated like everybody else, and then watch us barely beat Northwestern. Like, I go for it's entertainment in the end. Like, it's supposed to be fun. Anyway, good times.
All right, guys.
Cool. All right.
I could sit here and listen to Scott rant for hours, but I got to get going.
No, thank you guys for having me. Always love it. Anytime.
Appreciate it, Scott. We'll be back
Later.
Saturday afternoon, and I will talk then. Appreciate it.
All right. Later.
Thanks, everybody.